We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, and we're joined this week by Phil Brasher as well as Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos. Congresswoman Bustos, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Spencer, and thanks, Phil.
So I guess for starters, obviously, we're all trying to kind of adapt to this new normal that we're facing, as well as sort of this new laundry list of government programs that's being used in reaction to the fight against the coronavirus. So I guess my first question for you is, as we look at some of the various things that Congress has done, that the administration has done, what would you offer as your assessment in terms of how these programs are helping, or perhaps need to better help some folks in your district?
Well, so let's stay focused on ag for right now. We created this program called the Paycheck Protection Program, and that is what a lot of people are hearing about, that were designed to help small businesses. Well, it became clear to us that if you're a family farmer, you weren't able to get into that initially. So we had to make sure that that was opened up to our family farmer, and so they could get some immediate help. Say, we had this program where you could get $1,000 per employee, a grant to help you get through those early days. Well, we had to work that through to make sure that our family farmers could be helped. So it is a constant juggling act to make sure that we are keeping our small businesses in mind, but that many of our family farms operate as if they are small businesses. So I think that it is fair to say this is still a work in progress. And if I can tell you how we're doing things, I am on the call. We talked about this a little bit offline, but I am on phone calls from sun up to sundown. I'm on Zooms. I'm on conference calls with our leadership. But we do a lot of calls, say, with veterans groups, with the Farm Bureau, with school superintendents, with nursing home administrators, with the mayors and the village presidents. We do this by group. That is my way, when I can't be out on the ground, of making sure that I can reflect what I am hearing, what I am learning, and can be the voice for folks here when I go back out to Washington.
Mm-hmm. And we've also seen, you mentioned the Paycheck Protection Program. Obviously, that's been a very important part of the recovery package. But in terms of specific language from USDA, we have seen from Congress, a $19 billion program, $3 billion for commodity purchases, and another $16 billion for direct payments to producers. What are you hearing from your producers in terms of, what they're expecting from that $16 billion as they try and get through this tough time?
Well, that these times are like we haven't seen before, but I think we've got to look at this more than just in this moment we are in right now. We happen to be in the middle of a worldwide pandemic that we didn't know was going to come. But let's look at this more broadly from what's been going on in agriculture, let's say over the last 3 years. 2019 was terrible. It was terrible. Where I'm talking to you right now, right to my left, you can kind of see this window door right here. That's the Mississippi River. I live along the Mississippi River. I don't have to tell you what's happened over way too many years with flooding, with this unpredictable weather, and that impact that's had on our family farmers. But on top of that, we have an administration that frankly was handing out these small refinery waivers indiscriminately, and that has hurt a key industry, the ethanol industry. What's happened with biofuels in the congressional district I serve, we have 7 biofuels industries that are in the congressional district I serve, and this has only been amplified during this pandemic. So, but we have literally years leading up to that where the administration has not been respectful of how the law was written on these small refinery waivers. So we've got that. We've got, we've been in the middle. Whoops, sorry about that. We've been in the middle of really unusual trade agreements where, you know, there were threats to pull out of the what were we before the USMCA, our trade agreements with Canada and Mexico. There were threats to pull out of that. So we didn't know what was going on with that. Then we have to negotiate this USMCA where that took way longer than anybody had hoped. So those are kind of all the dynamics that led up to this time that we are in right now. And, you know, what is the expectation for the family farmer? That we be there, that we're there for them, that we fight for them. We've got the unpredictability now with the food chain, the supply chain, the what's going on at the at places like Tyson and places like Smithfield. We have a pork plant in our district. We have a beef packing plant. We have egg farm. We have an egg plant in our district. So we are seeing the effects of that as well, and especially, you know, again, amplified through this pandemic.
Looking ahead, picking up on that, I know you all are hard at work on the Democratic side in the House of pulling together a proposal for CARES 2, Phase 4 of COVID relief. Leader Hoyer and Speaker Pelosi this week announced laid out some of the priorities for Democrats. They obviously include funding for state and local governments who are struggling with all the costs here, an increase in SNAP benefits, and some other issues. But are House Democrats going to propose more funding for farm payments? Because, as you know, a lot of farm groups are saying what was put in the CARES Act, all the funding authority in there, is not going to be enough given what's happened with prices and market disruptions.
I think what we've put into these packages will not be enough. I think there's no question about it that we are going to have to do more. I was on a phone call this week with Colin Peterson, who's the chair of the House Ag Committee. I've been on the Ag Committee since I was first elected to Congress in 2012. And I can tell you, as much as I hear from our family farmers and the deep concerns about what are things going to look like post-pandemic, I can tell you it's amplified for a guy like Colin Peterson. And so, look, we know we have to do more. And we will work our hardest to make sure that we get more funding for our family farmers. I have a call later today with the pork producers, and you know we've got to look at things like what is going to happen if there is mass euthanization of pigs. What do we do with disposal? You know, things that, you know, we haven't had to think about these kind of things, but that is a reality right now. So we are even looking at things like, can FEMA get involved, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, in the disposal of the carcasses? You know, there's like a debris component, like FEMA can get involved in getting rid of debris after a national, a hurricane or flooding. How does that maybe play into this? So we are looking at all avenues. What I can tell you as somebody who represents a district with 9,600 family farms, where ag is our biggest economic driver, not just in this congressional district, but for our entire state. And I know that sometimes is a surprise to people in Chicago, but it is our biggest economic driver. I can tell you, we are there to fight for people we need to fight for. And look, I didn't grow up on a farm myself. I don't live on a farm, but all of my relatives on my dad's side of the family do, and they still do. And and we're just one family, and you amplify that by thousands of families. And it is my job to do everything I can to fight for the families who are going through very hard times right now.
Let me ask you specifically about USDA's CCC spending authority. It's capped now, obviously, at $30 billion. And so when they run up against that, they've had to come back to Congress to get that replenished. A number of your colleagues, including Sanford Bishop, who's the Democratic chairman of the Ag Appropriation Subcommittee are supporting an increase all the way to $68 billion, which would be inflation adjusted if the original limit was adjusted for inflation. Can you, is that in the cards, that kind of increase? And do you want to would you Democrats support giving Sonny Perdue that much spending authority?
Well, so we had an informal ag committee get together when we were back for the last package, that interim package that we voted on. So Colin Peterson, our chair, led it, but we had Republicans and Democrats there, and actually a pretty good turnout. And that was the biggest part of our discussion of where does that number need to go, and can we get that passed? I mean, if you're on the ag committee, you understand this at a pretty deep level. But if you're not, and if you come from, let me just throw out, LA or, New York City, where ag issues are not top of mind for people who not visited a farm or don't understand this. But I can tell you that I'm certainly in favor of raising that. And there was very good consensus for raising that. But to give Secretary Perdue total discretion over that, I'm absolutely not in favor of that. And let me tell you why. I'm not sure how deep the understanding is right now with the leadership at the U.S. Department of Agriculture of the wide spectrum of what agriculture encompasses. Again, I don't see there being a deep understanding of our corn growers and, for instance, the ethanol industry that we talked about before. So to raise that to whether it's 50 billion or 68 billion or whatever that number ends up being, I can tell you it will not be indiscriminately raised with Sonny Perdue getting the say of where all of that money goes. So I think there's got to be parameters around that. And that is what we discussed in this informal hearing that we had.
And before we let you go, we do want to ask, it does seem a little silly to be talking about election year politics when we're in the midst of a global pandemic. But from your perspective as someone that leads the House campaign efforts for House Democrats, and knowing that you have a number of vulnerable members of your caucus that are serving rural districts, and knowing that the president is very popular in rural districts and among some folks in rural America, how do you break through? How do you plan to maintain some of those seats, and in turn help to maintain the majority in Congress that you have here and that those rural members help create?
No, I think the saying that good policy is good politics. I think that fits, and good policy is hyper local. And in all of our districts, we represent somewhere around 700,000 people. That's generally a size of a congressional district. Geographically, they're all different sizes. Mine is 7,000 square miles and 14 counties. We have some that are much smaller. Ours is very rural. 85% of our towns, 5,000 people or fewer. But those are the kind of districts, the tough districts, Spencer, that you were talking about, that have been difficult for Democrats. But if you're hyper local, and what I mean by that, pay attention to what people at home need you to fight for. And I really think it gets down to, you got to work hard. As members of Congress, we make a decent wage. So we better show people that we're working darn hard to earn that. Number two, if you got a fight on your hands, you take on that fight. And we've talked about the fights that we have right now for our family farmers. So take on those fights. And then number three, whether, most of my tenure in Congress, I was in the minority. The Republicans led the House. This is the first term I've been in where we've been in the majority. So you better get results. And again, it doesn't matter if you're in the minority or the majority. It's easier to get results now, I can tell you. But my job is I better be fighting for those 9,600 family farmers. I better be fighting for those for the ag economy. And the people in these toughest districts, the Democrats in these toughest districts, many of whom are freshmen, serving their very first term, they are doing that. Let me give you one quick example as a closing thought. There's a guy named Josh Harder out of the state of California, and he's a freshman. in a tough district that he flipped. It had been held by a Republican, now it's held by a Democrat. Josh Harder brings a stuffed swamp rat to a committee hearing. And I don't know if you know what a swamp rat is, but these things are like ugly. I mean, these are like ugly as they can be. He brings a stuffed swamp rat to a hearing because this has become an invasive species to the crops in his congressional district. So that's hyper local, like a swamp rat. And I don't even know what one looks like. But the freshmen who are in these toughest districts, that's what they're doing. And so that's how you hang on to the seats. That's how you grow the majority, to have people who are running, who understand issues at the most local level. So I think we're going to hang on to the majority because of that, because of the outstanding freshman class that we have, and because of the outstanding candidates who are running, many of whom for the first time in their lives, and really showing what they stand for and what they would do as a new member of Congress as well.
Certainly a very wide-ranging conversation from PPP to CCC to wrapping up with taxidermy there at the end. Certainly a lot of things on the plate here, and we appreciate you making a little bit of time for us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Spencer. I really appreciate you having me on.